our dear viewers. You are most welcome to the 14th episode of the My Tree Initiative Green Talk Show. You're very welcome, and today I'm your host. My name is Rose Kopsinge. I'm a climate change advocate from Uganda. I'm part of My Tree Initiative. I'm part of Youth Go Green Uganda, and I am also I was the Ugandan delegate to the pre-COP 26 Youth Summit in Milan, and I'll also be going to COP 26 this weekend. So good to see everyone watching us, and wherever you're tuned in, stay tuned in. And we are bringing you the most exciting talk show in history. And as you're going to see, you're going to realize that we have slightly different faces compared to what we had advertised. Sorry, Esther Birunji couldn't join us, but she will be joining us in another talk show. So today, as you know, if you've been following My Tree Initiative, every Friday we talk about things concerning environmental protection, climate action, youth engagement, sustainable development, like all wholesome of things that are about people and planets. So you can follow My Tree Initiative on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube to follow up and see the previous talk shows and follow other engagements that My Tree Initiative brings to you. So, okay, so that is about me and about a little bit about My Tree Initiative. And I'll be coming through bringing a bit of other announcements throughout our talk show. And all I can say is that feel free, once our guests come through, feel free to send in your questions. Feel free to comment on the Facebook and let us know what you think. And also, I'll be forwarding your questions straight to our guests. So on the guest list today, I have very interesting guests, and one of them is Kenneth. Kenneth is a natural resource expert working with a very wonderful organization called Enable. If you've not yet heard about Enable, Kenneth will be able to let us know what Enable does and where it is. And we also have Ravi joining us today. Thank you, Ravi, for joining us today, wherever you are. And we'll be also hearing about what Right to Light is. I think even when you see Right to Light, I think you can have an idea what it might be about. But yes, we shall go deep into what Right to Light is. So we're going to start by just like small introductions, and then before we dig deep into today's talk show, where we are going to discuss about different issues coming from youth engagement, SDG 7 on energy, renewable energy, and the transition to renewable energy, but also be talking about natural resource management, which are all issues that actually concern us as Ugandans, as Africans, as humans, as global, citizens. So, Kenneth, I'll start with you. Could you briefly introduce yourself and introduce where you work and what you do?
Thank you, Rose, for that wonderful beginning. My name is Kenneth Mwebaza, and I work for Enable, the Belgium Development Agency. We are we are based in Uganda for our case, but also we work in other countries. Myself, I'm responsible for natural resources in the organization, and currently I run a project with the other consortium partners in the West Nile region of Uganda, and more importantly, in the areas of energy and environment. I'm glad to be here, and I hope we'll have to navigate across with the listeners and then those who are watching us during our conversation. Thank you very much, Rose, for this wonderful beginning.
Yes, that is Kenneth, and we're very glad to have you, Kenneth, today. Ravi, could you tell us who you are and what you do before we
Hi,
dive in?
Rose. Thank you very much for having me on here. Yeah, I'm Ravi, the founder of Right to Light, a social enterprise based in the UK as well as Uganda. We've been in Africa for like just over 6 years now. And as the name suggests, and as you said, Rose, Right to Light really is about giving access to affordable energy to the most needed, which is off-grid communities and people in refugee camps, for example, and really focused and homed in on SDG 7. But also, of course, it impacts SDG 13, which is climate. And so, if I was to briefly tell you what Right to Light is about, it really is climate change, children's education, reducing health risks, and empowering the youth. Simply because we're replacing in the Ugandan language, I think the taduba, the kerosene lamp, right? I hope I pronounced that right.
Yes.
So it's
Go
about
ahead.
replacing that, right? And it's crazy how such a small light makes such a big impact. You know, when I talk to people about it, and it's just saying it's just a small lantern. Obviously, it's a design of ours, but getting that through the whole of Africa is our aim, and eradicating kerosene is definitely up there. So that's a brief about what Right to Light does across Africa through the UK. Thank you.
Okay, great. That is great to hear that. And when you combine enable and right to light, we just see light coming through in terms of changing lives of people and contributing to giving back to the community, but at the same time protecting the environment. So I'll start with Kenneth. Kenneth, you've told us how you work with Enable, and could you let us, just briefly tell us what Enable is doing in terms of, climate action and youth engagement?
Thank you very much, Rose. Enable, by and large, does a couple of things in the country, and I mean Uganda. We are involved in health, we are involved in education, we are involved in environment and climate change, and yet many other things. But importantly is that our approach to development work recognizes that we have got to mainstream issues of energy and environment in our other interventions that we do. And that's our approach. Uh, Even in health, even in education, like I said, we have to ensure that the question of energy and environment is mainstreamed in these very interventions. And currently, we are in West Nile. I'm talking about Enable generally. We are in Rwenzori region. We are in Achol land. We are in Karamoja. And in the future, we look forward towards expanding our interventions across the country so that then we have got a wider catch of the people who are in dire need of our services. And so implementing projects across board in all our portfolio recognizes the need to involve the questions of energy and environment. And I will briefly take you through what we have been able to do in education, particularly in the project called TTE, that is Teacher Training Education, where we've been able to support the NTCs, National Teachers Training Colleges in the country, in terms of infrastructure development, but also in other areas like pedagogy and also digital education. But importantly, we've been able to offer assistance in infrastructure development with a clear eye on ensuring that the construction activities respect the question of climate change. So the design of these infrastructure developments look at how you can be able to have a structure that is constructed, but at the same time maintaining the basic tenets of environmental conservation and the climate change at that. And that has been our approach. So briefly, that's how we approach development in Uganda, but also in the rest of the countries where we operate globally.
Oh, that's so interesting, Kenneth, because right now, the reason why we are facing the climate crisis, or what many are calling climate emergency or climate change, whatever name we would like to use, is because the economic systems, did not look beyond they only minded about, money, and then they led us to, a problem, not only to the people but even biodiversity. So I think that is very important to think at system level and see whatever you're putting in place, if it's a development project, if it's a social project, how it affects people and the environment now and in the short term and in the long time. Okay, that's interesting. So back to you again, Kenneth. When you see, because right now I think we've reached a point where we've stopped arguing if climate change is real or not. The science proves that climate change is real. But when you look at, like, it proves climate change is real beyond any doubts. So, but when you look at in Uganda, we depend a lot on rain-fed agriculture. And when you look at the rural farmers, most of them do not have the information or the knowledge to actually know that why climate change is happening. If you go and ask them, they'll tell you, yeah, the seasons are not normal anymore. The droughts have increased in the last years and stuff, but they don't know what is why that is happening. And the extreme events have increased, especially in a country like Uganda that has already an erratic kind of tropical climate. So what is the role of young people in terms of, first of all, raising awareness uh, within our communities and within our leaders, but also driving climate action in the country and beyond?
Thank you very much. The role of the younger people is indeed immense, and I will take you through that too, for the viewers and any listeners to understand that. Like you said, information about climate change is no longer something that we should even doubt about. Of course, we know in many countries, leaders tend to, deviate from that norm, from that understanding, even when actually the science has got quite a lot of information to that in that regard. And I will provide a few, you know, statistical pieces of information to the viewers and listeners to appreciate that we are in a dire need to act towards, ensuring that we don't get, the adverse effects of climate change. The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change really has stated that we have 12 years to change the direction on green gas emissions. And if we do not do that, then we are not going to reverse the effects of green gas emissions. And that's very, very important. But also we know that the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services really has said that we are in the midst of the sixth mass extinction. What that means is that there have been over millions of years extinctions of biodiversity, and actually for the last many years we have had five major ones of biodiversity loss. Now we are amidst the sixth uh, extinction of biodiversity. And actually what has been happening over the last five episodes of extinctions is that we lose between 70 to 75% of species. And you can imagine what that means. And we may never again these particular species once we lose them. And many of these are very important in regulating ecosystems globally. And therefore, the younger people must understand that this science exists, but also have got a lot to understand it very well and be able to explain it to those that have no opportunity to understand this science. Because a country like Uganda, Rose, our level of education is quite low, and therefore our parents cannot really appreciate, other than looking at the events that occur, like you have heard of, uh, uh, floods in Kasese. This is in Rwenzori region, far Rwenzori region, where we have had, loss of lives, loss of property. Yes, our parents tend to understand that there is a change, in the patterns of weather, but they cannot appreciate the, 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 the science around those particular events. And therefore, the young people have got one big role, among others, of ensuring that, first of all, they understand the science, and then be able to translate this science into a simple way of understanding it, and then explain to our people, explain to our parents that we have got to do particular actions to ensure that We mitigate, but also adapt. So that's one of the biggest roles our younger people have got. But beyond that, which I now want to characterize as creating awareness for those who are not privileged with information, they have got yet another role, and this is action, green actions. The other day I was speaking to someone and he asked me whether green actions are indeed green, but perhaps when there is time we shall be able to get into that conversation. But younger people have got to be involved into green actions. And the simplest action that is green is planting a tree. I am happy Ismail and your team talk about tree. So the simplest green action is planting a tree. But that is again a debate that we can get into at a deeper level. So the roles of the younger people are immense roles.
Yes, thank you so much, Kenneth, for highlighting all those issues just in a few seconds or minutes. You were actually talking about the sixth mass extinction, and I think going back to realize that the last five extinctions were caused by a number of issues, but this sixth extinction is the humans that, as humans, that are driving this, mainly driving this extinction, which is a shame because as we said, like the humans, we're, the most advanced species, right? But we cannot even protect the other species and creatures that were created to live in this world. We are part of the ecosystem. We are not above the ecosystem. We are not above nature. And actually, as you might have seen somewhere people saying that, we need nature. Nature doesn't need us. If we all die today because of a flood or a landslide or whatever, the planet Earth will continue to to flourish without us. So thanks for diving us into that discussion and the role of youth. And indeed, as you hit on, is that there is a lot of indigenous knowledge. Our parents, our grandparents have this knowledge about how things have changed in the last decades, but it's just that the explanation of why they have changed and how they can actually, they also have knowledge on how they can adjust, but it just needs to be backed up and kind of backed up by science to make it a bit more relevant to the situation. So now I'll first go to Ravi, then I'll come back to you, Kenneth. So Ravi, understanding right to light, and when you look at your work and coming in a country like Uganda, whereby almost less than 20% of the people are connected to the grid.
Correct.
But then we have, when you look at the reports and how much energy we produce, they say that we produce much than we can consume. So it's just like beats my understanding when 80% of the people are not connected to the grid, but then we are producing more than we can consume. So, and that is why I think right to light comes in, because energy is I think it's like one of the key apart from food and
Food and
water.
water, yeah.
Yes, yeah, energy comes in very handy there, because without energy you cannot do anything. So
Correct.
yeah, so how do you see the people that are not connected to grid, the off-grid people, how do you see them also achieve a development that we call green or sustainable, but also leaving alone the fact that we are calling green sustainable? Energy is part of improving people's well-being. So how does access to energy or access to lights and other products that right to light is providing, how does that come back to help young people, to help children? How do you see the connectivity, especially in the Ugandan context?
Sure. I mean, first of all, it's a very interesting point you've raised, that almost like you got too much power. But, I mean, I think the hard thing about Africa in general, including Uganda, is the terrain's quite difficult. You know, populations are sparsely populated, and in very rural areas, some hard to reach areas. So getting grid electricity, even having you can have the grid electrification running through large parts of Uganda, but then connecting each household is the next issue, and then having reliable connections all the time is another issue, and then you've got the affordability issue, right? So there's layers of issues even if you've got grid everywhere, which is obviously the first difficult thing. So you got these off-grid populations, and I'll given my 7-8 year experience in Africa and in Uganda, Tanzania, etc. What people, so you say food and water. I think the next thing really is, and we talk about electricity, I mean the next thing is light. I've been in villages where there is zero light. People talk about, I want to power my fridge and I want to power my TV and all these things, but they don't have light. So that's why our foundation anyway started off with the complete basic, to say, right, first let's get light in places, and let's get some clean light in there. So that's where you've got that obviously we're using solar, and obviously there are products and solutions available to then you can have a light, you can have a fan, you can have radio, etc. So you can upgrade as you go along the chain, but by villages starting off with light, it increases obviously study time for children, more reading hours after school, families spending more time together. In refugee camps, for example, it stops rape. It acts as a protector. The health risks of not using kerosene, for example. I think there's a really crazy statistic out there of 1 million children a year in Africa alone, either suffering burns or dying from kerosene, for example. So at the very basic level of having access to some form of energy and clean energy, you've got education improvements, livelihood improvements, income saving. You've got health risks reductions, and then obviously as the communities and renewable energy becomes cheaper and more accessible, through SDG 7, for example, you'll start seeing all these populations, farmers having more access. For example, things like, if they have their mobile phone charged, they can compare prices and do more business. Street vendors can do more business. I mean, for example, we did a project installing solar street lights in Tabora, a town in Tanzania, and it reduces accidents, it increased nighttime activity, safety, business. So I mean, I'm just talking about light, but when you take food and water, the next thing is light, and the impact it has on societies, communities, children, is massive. And again, children being at the forefront, and girls as well, girls in education. It's so important that these kids, starting off at 4, 5, 6 years old, having the ability to come back from school and continue to educate themselves. And as Kenneth said, that the knowledge factor, I mean, it's the kids who are going to then educate their parents and grandparents. Not that they don't know, but the ability for them to explain why scientifically things are happening. So I mean, it's all interconnected and interlinked.
Yeah.
Hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, it does, because I was just thinking, like, some people, for example, you could be there and you're like, oh, maybe my fridge is not connected, but there's someone who is having food you know either in darkness, or actually struggling to find energy to cook food, whichever type of energy. But then you look at the kind of, with the whole climate change coming through, these are the most vulnerable people, right? In terms of, because climate change affects like the food systems, affects the energy sector and everything. And now, but we have, the developed countries, which are the main culprits in, leading us to the climate crisis.
Correct.
And, but when they're thinking about the transition to from fossil fuel to renewable energy, and putting taxes on fossil fuels and stuff, they're not thinking about what the impact is going to be to the people, like, in rural areas who cannot afford, these big expensive solars. And so, yeah, as we were talking, I was reflecting on so many things. But then to the question, to my next question to you, Ravi,
Yeah.
because you brought in this kind of, as you were calling it, it's a small light, but it has a lot of changes and additions on someone's well-being,
Correct.
on someone's, pride. Because if you have some nice lighting in your house, you're like,
Yes.
so
They show off. It's so crazy. They like, oh look,
yeah,
we've got light in our house, and like everywhere is dark, but there's this one house that's lit up. It's like Christmas.
yeah, I know, right? So, but how do you see the space, which space exists for Ugandan innovators or any other young person who has interest in improving lives and livelihoods of, Ugandans or Africans or other people in countries that, in least developed countries or developing countries? What space do you see in terms of innovations to address these, crucial socioeconomic challenges facing people, especially in rural communities?
I mean, that's it's a tough question because it goes to the grassroots, and it all starts off with education. Um, I think ultimately, let's live in a bit of an ideal world. What we want is technology to be in house in Uganda, and whether some parts of it imported from like developed countries or manufacturing countries like China. We need sort of apprenticeships. We need training programs. We need an ideas center where people, the youth, can get together and first of all address the basic problems that are there. Whether it's cooking, water, light. The very basics, and then look at industries like agriculture probably being the biggest one. And then having this massive brainstorming session, as well as having initiatives maybe run by the government, whereby I'm looking at it from a UK perspective as well. What the UK has done, you set
Mm,
up sort of apprenticeship programs or competitions or I don't know, I can't think of the word, but some sort of community where the youth can get together and uh, increase their skills, and then be supported by government initiatives to create, to manufacture, to develop, to invent um, you know products or solutions. And I think that's the way forward. There has to be some sort of cohesiveness to guide the youth to do something, and there has to be a platform for that.
mm,
I mean, I take the My Tree initiative. I mean, it's such a simple initiative, but look at the amount. I mean, there's so much to learn from just planting a tree, you know, and there's no no technical equipment or anything required apart from a spade and some seeds. But something as small as that, and initiatives like this. Now, I don't know where they got the idea from, but imagine there's so many initiatives like this that the youth can do step by step. But it's always about starting something small. I don't think we need to go into microgrids and all that kind of stuff. Let's just go back to the grassroots, the community level, and find solutions to basic problems, and across Uganda. And slowly, and that's the way I think you build up the foundation and the blocks
yeah.
to bigger solutions.
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. Talking about the young people waiting to do, massive things. Yeah, we need massive things, but we would need to start from, where we are and starting with what we have. So I think that is very key, and also recognizing that there are quite a number of opportunities, even through the UK government, the UK in Uganda, EU in Uganda, Enable. I've seen I recently saw Enable was doing some kind of like capacity building in Fort Portal in vocational skills. So I think as you're talking about that, I think us the young people need to look out for these opportunities. They are not going to find us seated wherever we are. We have internet. We have an opportunity to access internet, even if in Uganda it's a bit it's a bit tricky with some of the platforms being banned in the country. But we have an opportunity to look at these opportunities. There's a website called Opportunity Tracker. It's owned by some young Ugandan, and it tracks very many opportunities, grants for young people, and so we can always look out and find these opportunities. But also, I think demanding our leaders to start supporting us and putting in place a policy environment that allows young people's innovations and enterprises to flourish. So thank you, Ravi, for that. And I think I'll now go a little bit back to Kenneth. Or maybe before I go to Kenneth, I just like pass over some of the announcements that I have. And I have an announcement to remind our viewers and whoever will be listening in after this that My Tree Initiative has some other projects that are happening. And one project is called the Trees of Remembrance, and they'll be planting trees for all the loved ones that were lost due to COVID. So if you're there, you have a loved one or you think about, or you lost, or is a loved one to your friend, reach out to My Tree Initiative. They will be giving out seedlings to plant to remember these people that we lost due to COVID. Then there is another initiative or project called A Tree for Every Hero, and this one is also about remembering and honoring the public servants that are on the front line in fighting COVID. So please reach out to My Tree Initiative. They'll be giving out free fruit trees for you to plant, and also to remind you that those ones who are just joining, that this Green Talk Show happens every Friday of the week and is brought to you by My Tree Initiative. So back to Kenneth, and so Kenneth, I was just thinking about. I think this is a crucial question on where opportunities are existing or is enable in providing for young people to engage, and how can they find these opportunities?
Just like Lavi said, it's a hard question. This seems hard as well, but we will be able to. um, where should I begin? But let me say this. Enable is aware that one of the challenges in the country, Uganda, are real opportunities for the younger people. And again, in the infrastructure development work Enable has been engaged in, it recognizes the participation of the local communities in terms of what it can provide to to enable interventions. And in construction, for example, we Enable encourages being able to obtain materials the local communities can be able to produce if they fit into the planning systems. And that understanding is grounded on the fact that once intervention is done with the input of the local people, first of all, they benefit directly through provision of those materials, construction materials for that matter. But at the same time, the participation of the communities allows them to, have skills in the activity that is being undertaken by Enable, but also developing a sense of ownership. And that has been the approach in many of our interventions. But where are the opportunities additionally to, supplement this that I'm talking about? We have been running a project on skills development where the young people are identified, of course, on a needs basis, and they train them in skills development. And the focus has been on ensuring that these skills, respect the environment, green actions, green skilling, and that is being done actually in West Nile. We are doing the same in Karamoja, and the idea is to ensure that we bring the youth to be part of the development process, but also helping them develop multiple skills in actually simple things. We are not looking at the, very complicated skills development approach. No, we are interested in enabling the communities understand that even with the best skills, you can be able to take a step today, 2 steps tomorrow, 4 steps the other day, and so on. And that has been our approach. And we'll continue to do this work across the board. And of course, our challenge certainly is funding, and would want to have more funds to ensure that we reach out to many youth, engage them, have them on board, and then we move this journey of development together. So in part, that's what we have been doing. To just respond to your question, Rose. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Kenneth, for highlighting that. And I think it's great work that you're all doing. And I think, as you're saying, changing the world does not only need, big projects, starting small with the resources that we have, and the big things will also keep coming through. So I think now oh, I have another announcement. And the announcement is for our viewers that in the next talk show, we are going to host a representative of UNESCO, the country representative of UNESCO. That is on Friday next week. But also, we are going to have the mayor of Entebbe municipality joining us in the next talk show. So that is commercial announcements. So okay, so I think I cannot let any of you go before we actually talk about COP26. It's now the buzzword everywhere. COP26, COP26. So I'll just go to Ravi. Ravi, COP26, the UK is hosting COP26, and the whole world is having so much expectations in COP26. But coming back to, I think I'll ask this question as someone who is in the UK, not asking you in a Ugandan perspective. So, what are your hopes, from this COP26, and do you see anything, coming out? Because people seem to have concentrated a lot on COP26 and not actually thinking about what would happen after COP26. So, what is your feeling and thoughts about COP26, and especially in terms of like youth engagement and action?
I think I think the last word is the most important, action. Politicians are very good at all getting together around the table, giving you hopes, and they'll make these big plans. But the question really is, how serious is each country? I mean, let me put it this way: COP26, it's in terms of the youth. I don't think the youth have ever been engaged as much as they have been in this in COP26. Take 5 years ago or whatever. Like, the youth today are really engaged in climate change. It's the buzzword: green energy, climate change, not using fossil fuels, etc. So I think the youth are very engaged, more so than ever before. And I think what's lacking is not the political will, but the political actions after COP26. And economic growth. Obviously, every country cares about its own economic growth, and that um, usually happens through using fossil fuels. Um, and so, if I'm going to be totally blunt, I think COP26 is great, but I think the Queen here was overheard saying, it's great having these meetings, but what's actually going to come out of it? And I think that's going to be the thing to see. They'll make all these targets of being net zero by 2030 or 2035 or whatever it is. It's all great, but really, it's after this event we want to see real legislation, regulation, plan implementation taking place at a at a household level almost, to see how does one actually make a difference. So yeah, it's great. The buzz is there, but I think the main thing people are looking towards is, and it's I mean, you're in the UK now. The news is all about, great, we've had the event, now what? How much of this thing is actually going to be materialized? And I think that's the proof in the pudding to see.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I think as we're almost closing, I should remind our viewers that there's one of our guests that had an internet connection, and that is Rowena Twaire. We missed you, Rowena, and thanks for trying to send in messages. I'll just try to say to kind of summarize what Rowena is saying, could have said. So Rowena works with My Tree Initiative. She sits on the executive committee of My Tree Initiative, and she's saying she had a conversation with someone from Red Cross today, and they were talking about the impact of charcoal and tree cutting on the environment and health. And they talked about how reforestation is a very good measure, but sometimes the trees take so long to grow. So, and she's urging every young person to act and innovate solutions that reduce the reliance on charcoal, and also always remember about women and girls, because when you look at our setting in Uganda, you find that if a flood happens, or if a drought happens in a home, usually it's the girls that drop out to support their mothers in looking for food, digging and stuff. So the girl child is very vulnerable, but not we are not saying that boys are not vulnerable, but with the setup in the country, you find that girls and women tend to be the ones at the forefront of most of the sectors that are highly vulnerable to climate change. So, in whatever action you do, in whatever projects you do, remember to put gender at the center of your work. So, as we're almost closing, I'll come to, I think, Kenneth, you have a question. Someone sent in a question. Someone's Someone sent in a question asking, how can one get in touch with Enable, and what is the eligibility?
Rose, you want me to respond to the question right away?
Yes, someone sent in a question, one of the viewers, asking how can they get in touch with Enable? Where can they find Enable? And what is
Yeah, first,
it?
yeah, that's a very good question, and I applaud the person who has just asked the question, surely being able to link up with Enable. We have a website. Well, first of all, we are located in Uganda for the case of the country, Roa Kororo. That's our physical address. But if you want to come in touch with me, I'm based in Arua, and our websites are quite very public, so it should be able on our address. online platform, you should be able to have a telephone link where you can, inquire. So it is easier really to find us if you are interested in finding us. Physical address, Kororo, Lower Kororo, behind the Medipath. On website, you can also be able to log in and then be able to have a telephone uh, uh, address where you can have a call.
Okay. Okay. And Ravi, the same question to you. Where can they find Right to Light?
Right. So in Uganda, we have offices in the CBD area in Nakasero, and we have our representative there as well. So I can give details of that somehow if required. Otherwise, one of the best ways, obviously, is to contact us through the website righttolight.solar as well. So we have physical presence in Uganda, but also we have offices in the UK as well. So contact details available on the website as well.
Okay, and that's great. Just to also remind you that Enable is also on Twitter and other social media. You can always find them are there. Okay, so as we close, I'm just going to ask Kenneth, what last message and what advice do you have for any young person watching out there? An advice in terms of acting on climate change, but also going beyond just climate change, but thinking about bringing in innovations and entrepreneurship to act on climate change.
Yeah, one of the pieces of advice I have got to give to the young people is actually, first of all, even to advocate for a cheaper internet connection, because digitalization is now the way to go. Even as we talk about all these smaller technologies, even this particular, I was surprised that one of our colleagues was not able to link with us via this particular conversation because of the internet connectivity issues. And that also speaks to the need for the younger people to raise up their voice and say, look, speaking to the government through their local leaders, right from the LC5, chairperson to the MPs, and those who can reach out to the ministers, speak to them that the need to lower tariffs on internet is very, very important. And I should be very frank on this. If our country, Uganda, cannot look into the question of internet connectivity as a boost to the development agenda, we will be somewhere lagging as we get along. So advocacy by the younger people, and they are very good at doing that. I can tell you, younger people are very good at advocating for what they need. So advocacy for digitalization is very, very important through lowering internet tariffs. The other thing is that the younger people must take interest in understanding what they need. Today's timeline has changed from the past. The tools our ancestors used to live have since changed. And therefore, if anyone thinks that the hoe, which is traditionally used here for agriculture, will still support the present youth and then the future youth, is going to be very so. Understanding new technologies to adjust within this changing environment is very, very important. And then, lastly, the youth must begin to take action to mitigating the effects of climate change. And where should this begin? Because when we talk about youth involvement in actions that mitigate climate change, it seems like you need a billion, you need a million to do that. No, the actions towards climate change mitigation begin right from household.
Correct.
Household. What are you doing with your siblings as younger people? If you are already informed or you have some information, what kind of information are you sharing with the younger people within your own household? And how do you use that experience, acquired through household engagement to the community level? And then you have got the national level. Your participation, youth should be involved in national issues and then global. So the contribution of the youth is immense, right from individual to household, community, national, and global. And I think I want to invite the youth to refocus their mind. Let them leave these other issues that disturb them. Let us focus on the future that is supposed to guarantee them life and life that is really very meaningful. That's the advice I give to the youth who are listening in.
Wow, that's very powerful, Kenneth. That's very powerful. And it's sad that we couldn't have Rowena because of, small simple issues like internet. And Rowena, wherever you are, we're sure next time we shall have you. But thanks for sending in your voice. And Rowena is saying her last message is everyone should utilize any opportunity they get to raise their voices, be heard, and make change. And to remember that change begins with I, with you, with one. And she's saying blessings. So that's very clear, Rowena. Thanks for the message. And indeed, that's very wonderful message because there are other young people out there who are struggling with other issues, of unemployment, of, health, and they don't even have the opportunity to have a smartphone, right? So us who have the privilege to have, access to internet, access to a smartphone, we need to speak up and also ensure that our voices include the marginalized and people who cannot speak up, but also to lobby and find opportunities to have these people represented and also, have a better representation. So back to you, Ravi. What is your last message to the young people out there, to young people looking for innovations and opportunities? Where can they start from, and what are they? You've already talked about where they can start from, starting small. But what is your last message to our viewers?
I think Kenneth summarized it wonderfully well. The only thing I was going to say is that if I assume that there's internet access, and I think Kenneth, already said, and I know it's difficult. I've been there. If we can get that, I'm going to, as an economist, going to say, let's assume that that's already there. Then you really have everything at your fingertips. You really do, because there is so much information available for, instead of scrolling on Facebook, or taking selfies or whatever. Like, literally, you can spend more time educating yourself on climate change, because it's real. There's that much information out there. Look for opportunities online, and as Rowena said, that make your voice be heard. It's super important to find ways to, as a group of friends. It all starts with the household. Again, Kenneth, it was a point I was going to raise, is that everything starts with you. How your behavior, your actions on a personal level. Throwing stuff in the bin, recycling, all these small things that we take granted. These all add up to, the pollution in the world, and impacts the climate. So, personal level, as Kenneth said, let's assume you have internet, use it wisely. And then, community, group of friends coming up with ideas, doing local projects within your own community. Remember, Uganda is sparsely populated in areas, so doing something within your own community, which you then can copy paste, on a more, city level, or town level, village level, whatever it is. But there is something that everyone can do, and I take my tree initiative as just an example of, few people getting together, and doing something like that. And there's so much, so many activities like this that can be done. So it's for every individual to find something that they can do, and then and build it up, with friends and groups and family and etc. So, although I'm not saying there's what you can do. I mean, it's all very country dependent, and what limitations you have. We're working within those limitations. I think more can be done in the recycling sector in Uganda, and obviously that starts off with more knowledge of, why recycle, and, more can be done with basic renewable energy sources as well. And we've got so much sun and wind and all the rest of it. So, all the stuff on a local level, would be great.
No, thank you so much, Ravi. Thank you so much for, bringing up these issues of being able to use the privileges we have for those ones who have access to smartphones and internet to use those privileges wisely and use for development purposes and purposes of enriching ourselves with productive knowledge. And Thank you so much. And it's great to have you today. And we look forward to having you again some other time and maybe meeting some other time. And Rowena, we cannot forget you. Uh, Thank you for joining us in spirit and in messages. Yes, and I think for now, unless there's something else, thank you for tuning in to the Green Talk Show brought to you to my tree initiative, and see you again on Friday.
Thank you. Thank you very
Bye
much. Take care. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Loz.
Take care, Kenneth.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Lavi, for joining. Yeah, thank you.
bye. Thanks all. Thank you, all my guests. You've been so amazing.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.